Uber commissioned WSP to carry out research into how cities can become greener and more livable by increasing micromobility in last mile logistics. And today I'm talking with Polly Epov of Uber in Sydney and Graham Pointer of WSP in London about that report. And it seems to me that this is very timely as our city centres become choked with delivery vehicles as a result of increased online retailing. So Polly, perhaps I can start with you and ask, how did this commission first come about?
Wonderful. Thanks for your question, Peter. So the delivery economy is expanding faster than ever contemplated before. The delivery surge is here and it's not going anywhere. We know that in Australia, we spent a record $50 billion online in 2020, a jump of nearly 60% on the previous 12 months. And we really feel that in our business, and we've seen our business diversify over the years, and what started as bread and butter delivery from restaurants to consumer has now diversified into things like alcohol, retail, pharmaceutical, and beyond. We know that consumers want things faster than ever contemplated before, and what used to be the expectation of next day delivery is now next hour delivery. And we think that's great, but with any kind of great power comes a great responsibility for us to think very long and hard about how this impacts our cities. And we've invested a lot at Uber into safety, and we will continue to invest in safety as our first and most important priority. But we also wanted to give governments a blueprint of what they could do to support delivery and to create delivery-proof cities now and into the future.
Graham, what did you find were the sort of key benefits of micro-mobility, particularly when we look at London?
I think the key message, I think, coming through from the research and looking around the world is probably something that comes across as pretty straightforward when you look into it, that if you replace deliveries currently completed by trucks, vans and cars, and you replace those with deliveries by smaller, space-efficient people and electric-powered vehicles, that you're going to lower emissions. You have the potential to create better places for people, and you provide opportunities for local businesses to grow. There's that important economic dimension as well. But then most importantly, that you're making those places safer by reducing the big chunky vehicles on the road. And then when we look at London, you can see how the adoption of micromobility for last mile deliveries can help to deliver on targets for net zero and for cleaner air, which is really high up the policy agenda here. And then you've also potentially, as you've alluded to already, a big congestion and safety benefit. So as we order more of the products and food online, the traditional response has been for there to be more cars, vans on the road, clogging up our dense city and town centres. And so certainly my view, WSP's view, is that transition to micromobility becomes integral, really, to achieve the sort of London we want into the future. And we can make it work within London. There's been studies, for example, by Pedal Me, which demonstrates that in comparison to vans, particularly in those dense city centre layouts, cargo bikes are proven to be faster and shorter because you can make more efficient choices in how you move that cargo around.
So Polly, Uber contractors already use micro-mobility for deliveries, of course. How do we get the mode to spread and to just increase its modal share?
Well, we're really passionate about this, and noting that the findings in the research, we think that micromobility really is the future of delivery where appropriate. So, we're not saying that we want, liters of milk or kilos of dog food delivered by a typical cycle bike, but we do think more and less that short deliveries with lightweight items is the future of delivery. For mode share to increase, what the research shows is that safe infrastructure is integral to that. But it's also about creating the right regulatory settings. And it's all well and good to go and tell governments to go and build a whole bunch of bike lanes, but there's also a lot of other things that they can get right, and that starts at a regulatory level. So we know that safe speeds in high pedestrian areas are really helpful to creating safer environments for micromobility to thrive. We know that looking at new vehicles is definitely a way to encourage mode share. So Do we need to start looking at cargo bikes? Do we need to start looking at what a hybrid would be between a car and a bike? And we also know that accelerating and reducing friction points is an important part of this. So we need to be looking at pick up and drop off areas and making sure that our delivery partners can arrive at a restaurant or at a merchant or a small business, pick up items and move them seamlessly throughout city. So, you know, that point about infrastructure is really important. And it's about policy planning and city planning. So, you know, we know that the research showed that in London, accelerating and supporting micro logistics hubs is a really important facet of accelerating delivery by micromobility, just by creating an efficient style city.
Graham, what do you think governments, whether it's mayors or boroughs, need to do to provide the environment for this to take off?
The traditional policy maker answer to that is to look around the world and see what sort of examples of things that work or not. And I think that's what this research has enabled us to do. And what we found is that no city worldwide has really nailed this, but there's definitely plenty of things that we can learn around the globe. Just to kick off, I'd probably broaden that conversation, because certainly elected officials and civil servants, public servants have a really, really important role to play, but there's that broader story around industry and collaboration, whether that's the freight and logistics industry or certainly landholders in strategic sites, but then also businesses, small and large, and what they prioritize in terms of their business models. And I think through looking across globally and at world cities, we did find that there are 5 big moves. And I think in terms of that London story, I think you'd have a look at each borough and be able to have a look at these 5 big moves and see that a number are different steps in their maturity towards embracing micromobility. And so we see fundamental to embracing micromobility for last mile deliveries is that safe moving environment, making it easy for pick up and drop off deliveries, and that policy leadership to set the enabling factors. And then, as Polly mentioned, to really accelerate micromobility, the uptake, having the opportunity to remode those deliveries. So take a truck in and then unpack it onto a number of different vehicles for those micromobility for the last mile, and then testing and scaling pilots. If we look at London across those 5 criteria, it's doing pretty well against its peers, but where it could do better in particular is on that piece around making it as easy as possible to pick up and drop off freight, whether that's at origin or destination. I think Paris provides some good clues towards that in how it's reallocating road space, but all cities probably have a way to think about the future of that private land and realm, and how embracing deliveries, what that looks like by taking it out of the public realm, not assuming that the public realm can absorb all this activity. And then when we have new developments, what does that look like? What sort of consideration do those developers and landowners need to take in terms of servicing the communities in their properties or encouraging the right type of commonness? And then the other example I'd leave you with is around Utrecht and how it's embraced making use of the equivalent of their cycling superhighways to establish efficient distribution opportunities for the major logistics companies as well. And that requires a partnership approach with government, with those elected officials, to think about the best use of strategic lands to enable that sort of activity to achieve those broader policy shifts that officials want to see.
Polly, do you have anything to add to that, and how are you doing in Sydney on this?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think Graham gave a pretty comprehensive answer. I think that the one layer I would add is I think that governments could and should be really promoting a strong cycling culture from young to old. And at the moment, you know, Europe is trailblazing ahead of us here in Australia, where cycling culture is quite negative, and governments are doing everything they can to promote cycling culture and to remove this cynicism and this kind of painting that we have of cyclists as this men in lycra, this recreational cycling story. What we know through COVID-19, when we did some sentiment tracking, is that community sentiment towards cyclists had changed a little. And what we know is that people suddenly started seeing cyclists as, you know, frontline heroes. They were the people bringing them their food in times of lockdown and through COVID-19. And I think reimagining the stories of cyclists and really showing that they can help cities thrive, and that they can help people personally, and that they reduce carbon footprint, I think is something that the government should really collaborate with industry on. And I wish that Sydney were trailblazers like Europe, but you know, I think we've learned a lot throughout this research, and we've created a really solid blueprint that we can share with policymakers here.
Well, thank you very much. My local butcher has now got a butcher's bicycle with it delivers all the meat locally now, delivered for them. So really interesting changes. And thank you very much for telling me about this report. I guess we can download it from the WSP site, Graham, can we, to see what's in it in detail?
If you look for the report, it's called Future of Delivery, and you'll find it on the WSP.com website.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Peter.